Hi, so today I want to talk a little bit about footnotes in print or with PrintCSS, and we will have a look how they render in Print's PDFreactor, and also we will see how they render in the open source solutions VCPrint PageCS and in the PHP tool typeset.sh. So let's have a look which of these tools supports footnotes and how does it actually work. So as the first thing, I went to PrintCSS.live and let me remove the existing HTML code and also the CSS code we have here already. And then as the next point, let's change the page size maybe to a 5, so we have a nice page here, and let's start rendering this. If, for example, VCPrint, we need to switch the tab here actually, and we have our empty document. So for footnotes, what we first would need is of course content. So I have here a dummy text generator, and I simply copy a few paragraphs of text, and let's add some p tags around it so we can start using that text. Now the opening tags are still missing, so let's add them too. And then let's render this again. And you will see we have text for 3 pages. And we have a default margin, and now let's see how we get footnotes in. So let's say we want a footnote on any of these words. What you actually need to do is you need to put the footnote within the text flow. So you need to create a new element in here, let's say a span, and you write your footnote content here. So my footnote content. And if you render that, you will see the my footnote content directly in here. You see here we have my footnote content. But you don't want it here, you actually want a footnote. So what we need to do is we need to give this thing a class. So let's call it, for example, foot. And then we need to style this class in CSS. So dot foot, and here the actual thing which we need to do is we need the float property, and instead of float left or float right, which you know from the standard CSS for your browser, we need a float of footnote. And if we do this and render again, you will see the same, because actually, and that's the big difference, VCPrint doesn't support a footnote. If we render the same thing with prints, we see we get our uppercase 1 here, and we have our footnote below. When we go to PDFreactor, we see it looks slightly different. We have a kind of border here. We also have the footnote content, but here and here the one is uppercase. In Page.js, we see again the footnote is not supported with the float footnote, and in typeset we also have that problem. So right now, at least on PrintCSS.live, only Prints and PDFreactor are supporting the footnotes. The other tools might add support at some point. I'm not sure about that. So how or what can we do now with this footnote? So first of all, we have different things here for the footnote. We have the footnote call. The footnote call is actually this number up here. So we can style this number if we want. So for that, we need our class, and then we have kind of a syntax especially for the footnotes. So footnote call, and then we can do something like color red and font white bold. If we render that, we see here it rendered it bold and the color red, and the uppercase, or not uppercase, the superscript is gone because we were overwriting the footnote call. In PDFreactor it looks kind of similar. So this is the number up here, and now if you want to style our footnote below, or the footnote marker, how we would call it, the footnote marker is then actually the same number down here, and for the footnote marker all we need to do is actually the same thing. So we would just replace the call here with a marker, and then let's give it a blue that we see the difference. If we render that, we see here the blue one. If we try it with prints, we also see the difference. Then additionally to the footnote call, this number, and the footnote marker, we have the footnote itself, so the footnote content here. So it already has this class foot, right? So we can actually style that and say color green, and then our my footnote content would be green. We can add actually multiple footnotes here. So if you just copy this span tag and let's say add another one in the first paragraph, and we simply directly take that as footnote content here for this lorem ipsum, and we will see here, as it's the first appearance, we have the one here, the two here, and the footnote area below here actually takes as much space as it needs. So when we want to style this, we can, in the page, we can define the footnote, and here we could, for example, say background gray, and render that again, and we see here it's actually this background. So let's make that maybe yellow, very wild colors here, and we see now this is the area we can actually style here. And if we render it with PDFreactor, we see it's looking slightly different, and we also have this border above. This border above is actually called the footnote rule. So if you want to override that, you would actually need to define the border top here. So border top, let's say that we directly see it, 5 pixel dotted red, and render that again. You see here the footnote rule changed. Now let's see what I meant before, that it's taking as much space as it's needing. So we can actually, we only have 1.5 paragraphs on the first page. So let's take another footnote here, and let's make it a longer text for this footnote. Just select some more in the span. This text now gets taken out of the flow of the text and put here as a footnote for this word. So now we have 3 footnotes here, and simply the text which is not fitting on the page anymore will overflow to the next page. Of course you can do that on any page, so we can do the same thing on the second page. So also here we can add a footnote, and render again, and you will see the footnote below here on the second page, and the numbering continues. So we see here we have the 4 here you have the 1, 2, 3. If you don't want the numbers to continue, what you can do is the footnote actually also has its counter. So at the page rule, you can say counter reset footnote, and then it should reset the counter. Yes, you see here, now we have 1, 2, 3 footnotes on the first page, and we have 1 on the second. If you want to reset that counter, you also could reset the footnote counter, for example, based on headings if you have chapters. So let's say we have different chapters, maybe here chapter 1, and then make 2 paragraphs for chapter 1, chapter 2, and then at chapter 3, and actually then let's add also some more footnotes in here, just taking some words and making them to a footnote. So if we render that, it's still resetting at the page. So we see here it's 1 again. And now if we say we want it to reset on our chapter, we take simply the h1 element and would reset the footnote counter based on that. So now we see in chapter 1 we have 1, 2, 3, and then chapter 2 we have 1 and 2. Chapter 3 only starts here, so in chapter 3, when we want to see that, here we have 2 for the chapter 2, and now let's go to chapter 3 and put a footnote there. So for example here we have 2 still for the chapter 2, and here we have 1 again, so 2 and 1. It's a strange ordering, so usually would, let's say, let the chapter also begin on a new page. So we would have a break before always, for example. And you see that's not rendering here with prints, it's rendering with PDFreactor nicely. So prints needs a page break before always to make it work. So PDFreactor still works nicely, and then prints now also works. So in this way you can basically add footnotes to your document, and now if you don't want the numbering like we have it here, you can actually use different symbols. And in the standard PDFreactor and prints, what both support is actually anything from the list style type. So for example, some upper Greek or anything else. So to do that, what we need to do is we need to change the content of this footnote call or the content of the footnote marker. So when we go here and say content, and I just write test in here, we see we have test everywhere, but this is not really helpful, right? So what we actually need is content with the counter, and the counter is called footnote in our case, and then a second parameter we can say lower Greek. So this is not directly something specific to the footnote, it can be used for any counter. So now we see the lower Greek characters here, and of course then we want them matching in the marker, so we would use the same code for the marker, and also here the reset of the counter works perfectly. Now prints supports also own symbols, So what you can do here, instead of passing any of the list style types, you can pass symbols and then all the symbols you want. So for example, the asterisk, hash sign, and maybe a dollar sign. So if we check here first page and render again, we see asterisk, hash, and the ampersand. And down here still lower creek, so we take the same thing and we put it here instead of the lower creek. If we render the same now with PDFreactor, we see it doesn't take the symbols, it doesn't know what to do with it, it simply falls back to the normal numbers. So then let's see how far, or let's say how much footnote content fits on such a page. So let me go here again and simply take one of these paragraphs and put them into my footnote content, and let's render this again. So now what we see is actually, as the footnote also wouldn't fit on this page anymore because it's quite big, it splits the text very early and moves the text here to the second page and creates the whole footnote here. And if I render that now with prints, we will see a similar behavior, just that prints starts the footnote on the first page here, but continues it on the second. Another thing which might be interesting is how it's handling the footnotes with multi-column text. So you can say column count of 2 on our paragraph, and if we render that, we see the footnotes are still correctly below, and print still starts the third footnote on the first page and continues on the second, and PDFreactor has still the behavior as before, except that what we see here now, the third footnote is gone. We don't have it anywhere. This seems to be an issue here. Let's see if it works with a smaller footnote. So if we actually remove some content here from that footnote, let's just see where the span is ending. Here. And take that and make a normal small footnote out of it again. And there it would be here again. So in this way you can set the footnotes, you can style the footnotes, and as you see, you still have the page margin around it, so it's not going within that margin area. If we set a lower margin, let's say 0.5 centimeter, also the footnotes adapt to that. So in this way you can set the footnotes, and as you saw, it's only working in prints and PDFreactor on this website. The others do not support footnotes yet, although for page CSS there is additional JavaScript which gives you kind of footnote support, but it's not supported out of the box. And all you needed to do when we skip all these changes which we did at the end, so the footnote marker, the call, and our 2-column layout, the page breaks, and even here the footnote we only need basically the float footnote. And you can put that on any class, you don't need to name it foot or footnote. It will work with anything, and you see here our footnote appears. Okay, that was basically all I wanted to show you today, how to work with footnotes. I hope that was interesting to you. You will find actually more about it. If you go to this website, you can try it out. And there's also samples on PrintCSS rocks. So if you go to this website and then to the lessons, you will find also a lesson with the footnotes. So you will find one for footnotes multi-column, where you get first of all the rendering results of the different tools and also HTML and CSS code, how to use it. You see here also it's passed, for example, decimal or lower Roman as the number format, and you see here for antenna house there's a separate syntax for the footnote float. Additionally to this lesson for multi-columns, there's also a normal footnote lesson. And if you look at PrintCSS on Medium, that's my blog actually, there's also an article explaining the same thing, which I showed you right now. So the footnote call, marker, rule, area, and the body of the footnote with the sample code and the rendering result in both of these renderers, and also one sample with EasyPrint that you see it's not working with these tools yet. Okay, so I hope that was useful for you, and then I will record or stream soon again, and then we will have a look at cross-references and counters with PrintCSS. Okay, bye.